Welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
We have allowed ourselves to become so disconnected and ignorant about something that is as intimate as the food that we eat.
Be prepared to grow your own for victory.
God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to yean lambs and wean pigs and tend the pink-combed pullets who will stop his mower for an hour to splint the broken leg of a meadowlark. So God made a farmer.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough. Glad you're joining us this week. And this week we got a good one for you. We got the audience's choice this week. We're going to be talking about the why, where, and how-to of rainwater catchment systems. We're going to be discussing everything you need to know about building your very own DIY rainwater catchment system. But before we get into that, I'll give you a few updates what I've been doing around this homestead here at the small town homestead. Lots of squirrel hunting. Been bringing home a few squirrel. Had a couple dud hunts where I didn't bring anything home, but been getting one or two each time I went out, and making lots of jelly, grape jelly, and lots of salsa. So I've been doing a lot of that this weekend, especially. I'm a little late getting the podcast out because of it, a matter of fact. But that's mostly what's been going on. The garden's still pumping out food. Everything's still doing real good. A few things have dried up. New stuff starting to come in, and really enjoying the garden this year. It's doing real well. We've had a lot of rain. It's kind of been funny, too. The rain's just been coming in spurts. We'll get a pretty good storm, and then for a couple hours, and then it's dry for, a day or two, and then we get another storm for a couple hours. It dumps a lot of rain, but it's been good for the garden. I mean, it's been working out really good, so I haven't really minded it. We've had some tornadoes in the area, though. That's been a little bit troublesome. I know just north of us here, probably 50 miles, there was some 40, I think it was, the final count was 44 tornadoes went through here in Indiana, north of us. So, yeah, it's been a little bit scary. This time of the year, you just don't see that. And when you do get them this time of the year, they do seem like they're worse, the storms are. So, for all those who've been involved in that, we're thinking about you. Anyway, let's just jump into our main topic here for the day, rainwater catchment systems. Let's talk about a little bit why you might want a rainwater catchment system. I think the number one reason you'd want one is, for me anyway, it's water conservation. Having stored rainwater can save you a lot of use of water, especially if you're on a municipal water supply, or even if you're on a well. It can save you a lot of your drinking water, or the water, or if you're in town, it'd be on a lot water bill. I know we went through a dry spell here for, it was 4 weeks. I don't think we had any rain for 3 or 4 weeks, so we were doing a lot of watering the garden. And if you have a rainwater catchment system and you have it set up for gray water use, like running to your toilet or even washing your clothes if it's filtered, that can even save you a lot of water a lot on your water bill. It can save you from your well. Having a rainwater catchment system can also possibly help you to conserve energy, especially if you're on a well. If you're on a well, every time that you run water, your pump's on, or it's building up air pressure, pumping air down a pipe. That's what's pulling the water up out of the well. So you're running power. Well, if you have a gravity-fed rainwater storage system, you don't have that. So that can save energy. And really, probably what is the main thing for most people is water security. Everything needs water to survive, and having hundreds of gallons of stored water on hand for emergencies is never a bad thing. So it's just for preparedness purposes, having a water catchment system is a really good way to go. So where would you want to install a rainwater catchment system? Well, you have to take a few things in consideration. You have to think about rainfall amounts. The average roof collects over 600 gallons of water for every inch of rainfall. That's a lot of water, but you may or may not get as much rain per year depending on where you live. So those are some things to consider where to install a rainwater catchment system. So, of course, a roof, using that for your catchment, guttering, down to a downspout is ideal. You also have to consider your water needs. What are you going to be using the collected rainfall for? Because this will have a direct impact on the location of your system. You might be drinking this water. So I'll talk in a minute why that might matter. If it's for a garden or for landscape, where you put it may depend on how you're going to use it. If you have outbuildings that are closer to the area where you're going to be using it, it might be better to put it there. Now, another thing you have to take into consideration is the roofing material, because this can make a difference, of course, depending on the purpose of the water. Metal roofs are best, but asphalt shingles are fine depending on the water use. You're probably not going to want to drink the water, at least without a lot of filtration, off of an asphalt roof. But if you have a first flush system, and I'll talk in a little bit about what that is, metal roofs are really good. Both of them are very useful and absolutely useful for landscape and things like that. We'll talk a little bit more about those things in a few minutes. Let's talk about some options for capturing water. Of course, what we're going to look at today mainly is barrel collection. This is food-grade plastic barrels or IBC tanks that you do-it-yourself set up where you collect your own rainwater in one of those. But you can actually purchase cisterns, and there's all kinds of cisterns. There's rooftop cisterns. There's cisterns that you put in the attic. There's cisterns on ground level, and really that's what we're talking about. Those are going to be your barrels, and your IBC tanks are really a cistern at ground level. And then you have below ground level water storage cisterns, and these are really good. I mean, you can bury these. They serve multiple purposes. One thing about them, though, is you're going to have to run a pump to get that water back up out of there, so they're not gravity fed like these others would be for the water supply. You would have to run a pump. Some things you may not think about for water collection, though, are using berms and swales. This is called passive water harvesting, and it's the practice of slowing water down and encouraging it to soak into the ground by using land contouring that catch and direct the rainwater. And this can be really beneficial if you can walk it through your landscape and through your gardens and things like that, around trees and to orchards, and it slows that water down and helps it soak into the ground in those areas. And I'll actually put some links in the show notes to a couple other sites. One is 10th Acre Farm. She's got Amy over there has a great article on, they did some small earthworks in an urban homestead. Actually, both of the references I'm going to give you are both actually urban homesteads where they directed the rainwater through their property off of their roof using contours and swales. And it's really good. It's pretty neat. Riverbeds and run your piping through there and such. And I'll put the links in there. I'll let you go take a look at that, because that's primarily not what I'm going to deal with today. I'm going to deal with the barrel collection system. But I admire those ways of doing things. They're definitely it's definitely a way that blends in good with permaculture methods, and is a really good long-term property design. So it is more work to put it in, though. But I'll let you look at that. I'll give you those links, and just go to the show notes to see those links. One was 10th Acre Farm, and the other one is Verge Permaculture, and they're in Canada. Both of those links will be in the show notes. Another way you can capture water is with small ponds. Now, I've done this on my property. I have a small pond right at the back of my house, and I collect. And I actually got the river kind of runs right along. I put a little riverbed that dumps in off of a little waterfall, and I do have a pump. It's kind of decorative, but it actually does catch my rainwater off of my roof at the back of my roof. So it works really well. Now, I take this, and how I primarily use the water out of that pond is I have some small raised beds in my backyard not too far from that pond. And I water those raised beds, and my 2 trellises are real close to it too. And I use the water out of that pond to water those raised beds and those trellises quite often. I just take a water can, and I just dip in the pond, and I pull out, and I just go over there and water things. And it works really well. And not only do I get the benefit of the rainwater in that pond, I have koi in there as well. So I get the benefit of the fish waste as well as a fertilizer in my pond. So it's kind of a double up for me on the benefits. I'll have a link. Now, I don't have near as elaborate system as you could have. And there's a link in the show notes I'll put to aquascapeinc.com and their rainwater harvesting setup. And I can't really explain it to you. It's not something I've done this elaborate anyway. But you need to go in and read this page and watch the video they have on it, because it's a pretty elaborate setup, and ultimately it'd be the best way to go, I think. I mean, it's an awesome setup. Well, that and berms and swales. But we're going to look at simple setups today. We're going to look at barrel collection, and we're going to talk about the different pieces to a downspout rainwater catchment system into barrels or an IBC tank. IBC tanks are those big square tanks that farmers use a lot of times. You'll see on a bed of a trailer or something that they use to spray things. But you can get those really cheap. You can go to Craigslist, and even the blue barrels, the blue food grade barrels, you'll see those on Craigslist all the time real cheap. I've seen them for like, $15. I've seen those IBC tanks for as low as $50, usually around $100 you'll pay for one of those, clean, used, a new one. But yeah, I see them all the time on Craigslist, really cheap. So what I'm going to talk about today would work with either one of those tanks. Some pieces you're going to want to look at putting in. A downspout diverter. Now this is your downspout will drop into this. You'll have a little bit of a gap between your downspout and this diverter. And what this will do is it flushes away the leaves and the large debris before it enters the catchment system. And what it is, it's a little catcher that it's set at an angle, and it has a screen over it. So as the water falls down towards it through the downspout, it hits that screen and it flushes it off to the side. And then a lot of, you'll always lose a little bit of water there as it's splashing, but it's knocking the big debris off. And then most of the water is going straight down into the downspout, or straight down into the diverter through the screen. Now the next piece that you will have will be the downpipe first flush water diverter. Now this will divert the first few gallons of rainwater away from the storage tank until the roof is washed clean of dust and fine particles. Now I'll put some links to some videos. There's a really good 2-part video a guy does of making one of these himself, just using some adapters of PVC, a few pieces of pipe, and a ping pong ball. And what you want to do is run that into a tank for your first flush. Now you can run it right to the ground. You can put a pipe in, a pretty long pipe in, and fill that up. But I think you need a little bit more. As a rule, what you want to do is run about 10 gallons of first flush for about every 1,000 square foot of roof. And so you could see where, throwing an extra 50-gallon tank barrel, 55-gallon barrel. It doesn't have to fill all the way up, but that would really get your roof cleaned off, and all that water would go into that barrel. And you will put a drain at the bottom of that barrel to empty that barrel out after every rain. So you want that water diverter. And like I said, there'll be videos showing you how to build one of these first flush water diverters. It's really not that difficult, but you can also buy them. I mean, you can buy one, and I'll have a link for one you can purchase for the first flush water diverter kit. And they're not that expensive. I think the one I saw that I'll put the link to, let's see, it's about, it's $32, $33 from Amazon, But, hey, we're talking about DIY stuff here today. Honestly, to build it yourself, you're just going to have probably less than $10 in it with the pieces. I mean, PVC is really not that expensive, so it's a pretty inexpensive thing to build, but it's not that expensive of a thing to buy as well. So you might just want to buy one. You want to get this done quick. You want to put it together with as little trouble as possible. You might want to buy one. Another piece of the catchment system are screens and filters. Now, you will need screens because there's going to be some debris that will sneak through. So you'll want some fine capture screens before it goes into your collection tank. And now whether you want to filter or not, that's something you have to decide. If you're going to be drinking this water, you can filter it before it ever goes in the catchment system. If you're going to be using this water to feed livestock or anything like that, you might want to filter it. If not, if you're just going to use it to water your garden, you don't have to necessarily filter it. Just the screens would be enough. But you can put filters in before it goes in. Now, you can just as easily filter it after it, bring it in the house, run it through a big Berkey, something like that, to use the water. So, filtering it there is not necessary. Of course, you're going to need a collection tank. As I said before, the plastic barrels, IBC tanks, or a large cistern. Perhaps this same process works for, say, a buried cistern that you might have. The only difference is it's not going to be gravity fed. It's going to be you have to use a pump to get the water out of the cistern, a large cistern. But you can raise cisterns as well. It's really any big, large containment vessel that's going to hold lots and lots of water. So, yeah, you can. Technically, I guess a water tower is a cistern. Another part you're going to need is an overflow valve. Now, this is for when your collection tank eventually fills up, and it will. You're going to need an overflow valve, which will allow the rainwater to be diverted to the ground once that happens. And you're also going to need a spigot for getting the water out of the barrel. Now, that'll go at the bottom of the barrel. That's where you'll hook your hose to, or whatever you're going to use to take the water away from the collection barrel. So those are just some of the parts you're going to need for your rain catchment system, and all those things are really pretty simple. I'll kind of go through. I kind of went through the order there of how you'd put them in, but now you can also use the spigots to connect multiple barrels together. So you can hook as many as you wanted together, and you can do that through the overflow, which is basically a spigot at the top, and it would, as it fills up one, it would start dumping into the next one, and that one fills up, it goes to the overflow and dumps into the next one. So yeah, you would just connect your barrels that way. And there's kits for that as well, but the parts are real inexpensive when you just buy them separate, rather than buying these kits that are kind of put together, and sometimes they charge you more for the kits than what you could buy the individual pieces for. So I'll have some links to all that stuff in there. Let's talk about actually putting it together. I kind of did there as I'm just describing the parts, because I pretty much put them in order. But you're going to need an overflow. You're going to need a collection tank. In that collection tank, you're going to put the spigot at the bottom. You're going to put the overflow valve at the top, and you're going to thread those in. You're going to drill a hole. They're going to pop through. They're going to kind of thread in, turn in. It's not real complicated. Of course, you're going to need some PVC that will hook into the top of the barrel. So you might have to get a couple adapters that fit the pipes just right, and some bends and elbows and some short pieces here and there. But anyway, it's going to go from the downspout to the debris diverter, the downspout diverter. Then you're going to go from that into the first flush water diverter, through your screens or filters, into the collection tank, and then, of course, if you've got multiple collection tanks, you'll hook those together through the overflow valves. So there's kind of your layout. It's a pretty simple setup. You can look all over the internet and see pictures of these set up. I will have links in the show notes of systems you can look at. It's really simple, and it's very useful. So I would suggest it. Just looking at some pictures, and you'll know exactly how this all goes together. Now let's talk a little bit about caring for and maintaining a rainwater catchment system. You got to make sure you empty that first flush barrel or pipe, if you're just going to use a piece of PVC pipe, every time after a rain. Get that cleaned out so that it fills back up the next time. You don't want to use the water off the first flush. It gives it a chance to wash just the debris and the dust. And you know what? If you have asphalt shingles, there's pieces of that asphalt that come down and stuff, and you want that to go through your first flush tank. You're going to have to clean any screens or filters that you have. So you might have those in the middle of a pipe. You might have to pop apart, take those out and spray them out or clean them occasionally. Something that there's a lot of debate about is algae in a tank. Now, you can prevent most algae, by just blocking the sunlight. So tanks that are colored or dark, when you put a lid on them, they have no sunlight going through them. Those are probably not going to grow any algae in them. Now, if they set long enough, the heat sometimes can generate some kind of algae, but it's usually not a problem. And from what I understand, the algae really doesn't hurt anything anyway. you can actually have more problems out of the stuff you're dumping in there trying to kill the algae than the algae would cause you any kind of problem. It's not harmful for anything to drink or put on a garden or whatever. Where you run into the problem with algae is that it can actually get so much of it in there that it could actually plug up things like your spigot or something like that. So you don't want that to happen. A good way to kill algae, and I don't hear anybody talking about this, but I'll put a link to it. And I know this because I've used this man's advice in my koi pond, and it kills the algae in it really well, and it doesn't hurt fish or anything. But most people would suggest some bleach, and I won't use bleach. I use hydrogen peroxide. It's really safe. It doesn't even hurt the fish in my koi pond. And the suggested amount for using in rain barrels is about a half pint or 8 ounces per 50 gallons of water, and it'll kill the algae in those tanks. And it works really good in my my koi pond for sure. And I'll put a link to that. That's from dirtdoctor.com, and I'll put a link to the post he has on that using that. And like I said, I can give testimony to the fact that works because I use it in my koi pond. So that's just a good way to prevent the algae if it bothers you. You may not even worry about it unless you start getting so much in there that it's starting to plug things up. Okay, freeze protection for your water barrels. If you live in a place where the winters get really cold, like where I live in Indiana, water freezes, believe it or not. And you're going to have to either drain those barrels or you're going to have to keep them warm enough to not freeze. Draining is easy, and if you live in a place like that where it gets that cold, having the extra water is really not a big deal anyway. In an emergency, you have snow. We always have snow on the ground all winter. So having emergency water, we don't really need it for that. Quite frankly, the easiest thing to do is just drain it. What can you do to heat it? There's some people who build greenhouses around them and try to keep them solar heated. There's now something I had thought about doing at one time was putting a little lean-to shed on the side of my house around those barrels, and actually running a small piece of ductwork off of my furnace ducts out through the wall of my house into that shed just to keep it barely warm, like a real small pipe, like an inch diameter or something, real small vent to pump just enough heat in there to keep it from freezing. I've never done that. It would work, I believe, and it might be something I'll do in the future. But for now, we just drain the barrels and don't worry about it through the winter. But if you don't, it very well and probably will bust your pipes and or the barrels. So you want to drain those or keep them from freezing. You can use this water on gardens and landscapes. You can use this water in your gray water for flushing toilets, which is something I would like to do in the future. And that might be a reason why you would want to keep that water year-round and keep it heated up, is that you would get, if you could use it for your gray water, using it for flushing your toilet or even washing your clothes if you had it filtered to where it was pretty clean water. Now, you can use it for drinking. I wouldn't be afraid to use it for drinking or cooking in if I filtered it through a Berkey, sterilized it either by boiling, or which is what I would do, is boil it, or you could use the bleach method of putting a couple drops of bleach in there and killing any bacteria in it. But I would purify it and I would filter it before I would drink or cook in it. You have to do that. But there's really no reason why you couldn't run it to a toilet tank, as long as it was higher than your toilet tank. You got to keep that in mind too. It's gravity fed. You have to have it perched up pretty high to have enough gravity to empty the water into your toilet tank. So it'd have to be higher than the toilet tank. But I think it's a great use of it. I mean, it could definitely save you a lot of use of your other water. Now, something that always comes up when you talk about rainwater collection is that people say, well, there's places it's not legal to store water. And that's true. But it's not true for Colorado anymore. Colorado has actually just legalized it in their HB 16-1005 bill that was signed May 12th, 2016. And as of now, you can keep 110 gallons of rain capture in barrels now in Colorado. So I'm not so sure about other places. Now, the problem is is that water they want that water to be put back onto the ground, run off onto the ground, soaked in. So Colorado, part of their bill does say that it has to be used outside in landscapes or gardens. It can't be used in the house to, like, say, water house plants or something like that. So, because they want it to continue to be runoff. And it will be, as long as it's used outside. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good idea. That way there's water's not being put down a sewer system. Say if you ran it through your say you're on a municipal water supply, you're hooked to the city sewage. If you run that through your gray water, that's not going to go into runoff into the ground. That's going to go into the sewer system. So that rainwater that you're collecting will not be put back onto the ground. And that's what they were worried about. They want it to stay on the soil and continue to be used as runoff. And that's fine. I think it's a good idea. And I'm glad to see Colorado come around to that thinking. And I'm not sure about other places. I wouldn't doubt it if there's some places in California maybe with those laws, with the drought situations they've been in. So perhaps that's the case there as well. I'm not real sure. But it's not as big of a deal as a lot of people make it up to be. There's just not a lot of places. There never were a lot of places that it was illegal to do this. Now, where you hear about some guy went to jail for collecting rainwater, like I heard about one guy who went to jail for it. Well, the guy was basically damming off all water from ever running off his property and going to any neighbors who were depending on it. And you can't do that. And so, you know, you don't want to read too much into that, but at the same time, I do get appalled by the government thinking they have the right to not allow you to, you know, catch some water that's running off of your roof. But at the same time, I also understand I understand the reason behind some of the laws, although I don't agree with them. So it's not really a big issue like a lot of people might make it out to be. And if I'm wrong about that, if you know of a bunch of places that, you know, where it's illegal or there's a big deal being made about it, let me know about it, and we'll put it in the comments, or I'll come on later and we'll talk about it. So those are just some of the ways you can collect rainwater for your garden, landscape, for other uses, and hook up a barrel collection system. It's not that hard. It'll be something that you'll have a great benefit in your homestead. And I think that ultimately it'll make your homestead a lot better, especially if you live in a place that doesn't have consistent rainfall or a lot of rainfall a year. It'll be something you'll be able to use in those dry times. It can save you a lot of money on perhaps a water bill if you're an urban homestead, or a lot of worry about not having enough water to keep things growing. Consider the swales and the berms. Consider putting in a pond. Consider larger systems, like larger buried cisterns. But start with a barrel catchment system. It's not difficult. And you know what the bottom line is? Water catchment can be as simple as just setting a barrel out with an open top on it and catching the rainwater that falls in that. I mean, you're catching rainwater, but you can catch a lot more from a roof and a downspout. So whether you put it at your barn, your garage, your house, doesn't really matter. Whether you just got a barrel sitting out next to your garden that's catching it in the top of it, that's great. However you can catch some water and use it, it's a great thing. Do what you feel is best for your property. You got rain falling on your property. Use it. You don't have to use it right away. You can save it and use it later when you really need it. And by the way, I'd said that this was the audience's choice for this podcast today. I had actually put a poll up in our Facebook group. That would be the Homestead Front Porch. If you want to join, head on over on Facebook to the Homestead Front Porch and join our group. It's a closed group, but all you have to do to join is just request to join, and we'll get you in there and have some great conversations. And I think I might start doing a poll each week on what the podcast might be. Maybe put 2 or 3 options up there and see who wants to hear what. And this was by a major lead. This one won out. People want to hear about putting in rainwater catchment systems. It's not difficult. I was actually worried because it doesn't seem like there's that much to say about it. But at the same time, building a rainwater diverter is kind of cool. And you know what? Watch those videos on that. Those will be in the notes. Watch the videos. Check them out because they're pretty cool. And I think you should build your own just so you know how things work, and it's something you can take apart and fix when you need to. Make sure you head on over to iTunes and give us a rating and review. Head on over to the website, smalltownhomestead.com. You'll actually be able to see some pretty extensive notes on this podcast with all the links and such. And take a look at all the other articles we're writing. Also, every Sunday, I open up a page called the Blog Hop. And we're allowing other homestead bloggers to leave some links to some of their great articles. So go to the Blog Hop at smalltownhomestead.com and just click on the Blog Hop link at the top of the page and check out some of the other great articles that some of the other bloggers out there are leaving on our page. So good stuff there, good reads. You can look at some of the past ones that are all linked up there. Check those out. And head on over to the front porch. We'd love to see you there. And until next week, happy homesteading.
Thanks for listening. To see the show notes for this podcast or listen to other podcast episodes, go to smalltownhomestead.com. There you can also read our blog, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and take advantage of the many resources we make available to help you along in your homesteading journey. Please share this podcast and help us to carry out our mission of helping others to homestead today for a better tomorrow.